Well, hey there, my friends. Welcome to August, the month of my birth. I wanted to share with you another tip. Again, this is particularly directed at folks who might be newer to reading, but who knows? I think I often enjoy going back to basics, so maybe this will be helpful for more folks too. I lurk. Oh, I should also apologize if there's any background noise. I can't tell if there is. It's too fucking hot to turn off the air conditioner here. I did turn off the fan in my office, but if I turn off the air conditioner to make this video, it's going to take way too long for it to get to a livable temperature. So, pardon on that. Anyway, I lurk in a couple online Facebook groups. I sound like a 900-year-old Luddite. I lurk in a couple tarot-related Facebook groups. And I do that partly because I joined them and forgot. And every once in a while, I'll see someone I know commented on something, or, I'll be just sort of killing time and scrolling through. And one of the things that I'd noticed in a handful of groups is that a lot of people go to these groups for help. And I'm a big believer in doing that because I think communal learning is great. And I think that that's what we're doing on YouTube, right? And I think that it's a good way to get support. But in watching a couple exchanges over the years, I've realized that we may not necessarily be getting the help we need when we do a reading for ourselves and then go to a group and say, help, I don't know what this means. What does it mean? I drew this card to answer this question and I don't understand the answer. What would you say? And that's an interesting thing because again, my opinions are always my opinions, right? But I think that the relationship between the reader and the question and the cards is paramount. And so I do think that when we do a reading, we do get the card we need. I think that when we go to someone for help and say, what does this mean? Just to pull sort of a wonky analogy out, I guess what I would compare that to is like, I go to one doctor and get blood work. And then I go to a completely different doctor and say, do I have high cholesterol? Because one doctor did the blood work, and that doctor's going to analyze the blood work and tell me if I have high cholesterol. But another doctor didn't do the blood work, and it's not a perfect match. But what I'm really getting at is the person who drew the card for the question, the relationship between their understanding of that card and the question is the key relationship. And someone who does not have that relationship won't make the same connections. And so they will definitely have answers and opinions, but it's not by my way of thinking necessarily an accurate answer. The other thing that is even more complicated than that is you're going to go and you're going to ask for help, and everyone's going to disagree with each other because everyone has a different way, a different relationship with every card. Despite those truthers out there who think there's only one way to do it, there may be one way to do it, but the one way to do it is different for everybody. And there, believe it or not, is a workaround for this as readers that we can learn and that we can talk about. So I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to talk about in this video. And this is not to critique anyone. It's not to say that folks in groups are not helpful, that those forums are not helpful. They are. But I think there's something we can do as readers when we go into those forums and ask for help that can give us a better experience and give us a reading, help us wind up with a reading that's more likely to be useful. So I'm going to use a real example in this, but I'm not going to use any names. But there was just as a way to illustrate what I'm talking about. So I was scrolling through one day, and in my newsfeed on Facebook, I saw a question. And again, if whoever posted this question is watching this, please accept my apologies for using you as an example. But it's a good example, and so I want to thank you for it. But I don't know where it came from. And the question was, does the tower mean I got the job? And it's a really good question. And the tower is not a card that is easy to read in that situation. And of course, this reader posted that there, and everyone had different answers. And so, from my point of view, the reader is just as confused now as they were before they posted the question, because now they have to choose someone to believe or to agree with. And here's a way around that. Here's what I would say. And this returns to something that if you've watched my channel over the years, you'll know I harp on a lot, which is context, 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 context. So here's how to guide yourself out of that conundrum of, oh my god, this card doesn't make sense. One of the ways I already did a video on, which is not doing one card draws, but doing 3 card draws. So you can check out that video. But if you do, or whatever, here's one thing that you can really work with in order to find the answer. And then what you can do once you have your answer is go to those forums and say, hey, I pulled this card. Here's how I've worked out the answer. Would you agree? And from there you can go from and see what people say. So, but let's look at it this way, right? So the question is, did I get the job? And the answer is the Tower card. So, the first thing that comes to mind, right? I think for a lot of folks, we would see no, because the Tower card is almost always negative. But for most of us, there are more than one layer to each card, and what kind of negative, there's different kinds of negative as well. I mean, the term negative doesn't mean necessarily bad. It means it negates something else. So there's a whole, I felt so badly for this person when I saw that, because I thought, oh God, that's a hard card to interpret in that context. But context is also the solution to it. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to think about everything we know about our situation. And I would actually recommend doing a bulleted list and taking a piece of paper and saying, okay, I know this, this, and this about my job search. So the question is, did I get the job? And the card that I got is the Tower. Now, how those things fit together is the puzzle that I need to solve. So if I list every given circumstance about my question that I can, that's going to give me more context than just the question itself. So what do I know about my job search? My job search is an attempt to change careers. So I put that at the top of my list. So I'm trying to change careers. I'm not unhappy at work, but I want something better, or I am unemployed and I have been on the search for about 3 months and I'm starting to run out of savings. Whatever the case may be, right? I list sort of everything I know about the question that gives me context. And that is one of the first things it's one of the first things we really should do whenever we do a reading, honestly. Because the more, I've talked about this many, many, many times. I talk about it in my book. The more specific the question, the clearer the answer will be. So specificity is good, but sometimes we get lazy. Sometimes we don't think that way. I'm guilty of this all the time. Again, just because I say stuff that I've realized doesn't mean I'm good at doing it. Because when I read for myself constantly, I'm just like, I know the question. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Oh shit, that question wasn't as specific as I thought it was. So we can go back retroactively. Because that information is internal. We know that stuff about our search. We're just allowing ourselves to expand and provide context. So I want to change careers. I'm unemployed, whatever. Everything I know about it. And then everything I know about the card. Good and bad. The Tower means something devastating. The Tower means something shocking. The Tower, sort of everything. And then I would really encourage you, too, to explore... unless you use reversals and your reversal indicates, unless your reversal system is something as simple as like upright is light and reversed is shadow, for example. Unless your system is that simple, I would encourage you to look at the light and shadow aspect of each card. And then you put them together. You think about everything you know about the situation, and you think about everything you know about the card. And then you say, how do these fit together? So let's go with my first example, which is that I want a career change, right? So I know that I want a career change. I'm relatively stable at work, but I'm bored, blah, 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 blah. The card means all of this. So I then put them together. What would the card mean in the context of all of this stuff? And what I know in this situation is that I'm looking for a change, and I'm relatively stable and happy, but bored. And the Tower blows all that up. So in that case, I would actually read that, if it were me, as a yes, because the stability of my situation is going to get blown up by the tower. You know, if I were in the situation where I was unemployed and out of work for a while, I might read that as a no, because I'm more devastated by the answer. Um, Again, like, now that I'm thinking of it, I could go further and further. And the tower in the unemployed situation might be a yes, because it blows up the status quo. You know what I mean? So my new normal has become unemployment, and the tower can undo it. So that's why specificity with context is so important. Like, is after a month of unemployment, is that your new normal? Probably not. But 3, 6, 9 months, that's your new normal. And so the tower might blow up your new normal. After a month, the tower might just mean disappointment, because what does the tower do? The tower takes what's stable and consistent and explodes it, and the situation I'm describing in the career change indicates a stasis. But after a month or two of unemployment, that's not necessarily stasis yet. And of course, this depends on your own interpretation and what you view as stasis and all of that. But this is one reason why, when it comes to the majors, I actually like to not even think in terms of light and shadow or negative and positive, but to have sort of a base level neutral meaning for each of the majors that allows me to start not with the judgment of is this good or bad, but with the action of the card. So the Fool, I could reduce each of the 22 to an action or a distillation of a relatively neutral state. So the Fool goes, the magician channels, the High Priestess keeps secrets, the Empress creates, the Emperor solidifies, the Hierophant thrives in tradition, whatever. You know what I mean? These are literally just off the top of my head. But if I start with like a base neutral, then I can let the context be indicated by the things I know about the situation. So that if the tower is not always a bad thing in my mind, if the tower means shaking up stasis, whether that's good or bad, the context of the question colors the answer. I'm happy at work. I've been in my job for a long time. There's rumors that there might be a merger. Will I keep my job? The tower, bad news. You're not going to keep your job because it's shaking up the stasis. That's what it does. Whereas what's another negative? The devil, right? The devil keeps. Let's say that that's an action assigned to the trumps for the devil. The devil, which we often associate frequently as very negative, in that same question, I'm happy in my job, been in it for a long time, news of a merger, will I lose my job? The devil takes, the devil keeps. So in that case, I might associate the devil with actually keeping your job. The Hanged Man, to me, is about... I have a very kind of old-fashioned view of the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man experiences consequences. So in that question about, am I going to keep my job, it might make me say, if there's anything you've done that's sort of untoward, there's probably going to be consequences for that. So just know in your job, like if you've been trustworthy, but if you've been really good about it the whole time, the consequences of that will pay off, so you'll probably keep your job. So they may instigate in a merger the investigation of like who's been doing what. So in that case, your reputation is going to be the indicator. If I were to ask that same question with the Lovers, I would say that you're going to have a choice between whether to stay or go. They may offer you a different position or a severance. Do you see where I'm going? You know what I mean? But all of those iterations of the majors are really neutral, and the question and the context colors how I interpret those, which I think is better than just saying the tower is negative, the devil's addiction. But again, that's just me. And even if you have very strong positive and negative associations for each card, the context can still color the answer. And the more you know about the question and the more you're able to think about what the card does as an action, the more you can put them together. So if we get, for example, the question about did I get the job? And we go back to the first scenario, which was that I'm happy in my career, I'm looking for a shakeup. um, just want to change things, new career change, and we get justice. What does justice do? Justice balances. And again, this is just off the top of my head because I don't always even do this. I'm just sort of sharing with you things I think can be effective. Justice balances. So I say, okay, what does justice do? Justice balances. I want to shake things up. Balance. No. So I'm probably not going to get the job because it's not. I'm going to remain stable. I'm going to remain balanced. Now, that's just off the top of my head. If I look at it a different way and I think about what the justice does, what the justice card more traditionally represents, then I'm going to do the same thing, but think it's going to take more of an effort to get there. So if I were thinking of a more traditional interpretation of the justice card, I would probably say in that case that, gosh, that is a tough one. Did I get the job? I'm happy in my career. I'm looking for a change. I think my instinct, as I think about justice, is telling me that it's a question of whether you're right for it. So I would have to, in that case, really think about the fact that I'm doing a career change, right? Did I apply? So this is going to turn back on myself. A career change is tricky, right, when you're applying because jobs are often about what experience do you have. A career change, you're often going into a situation where you don't have enough experience or you don't have a similar experience. So what I have to do is figure out how right I am for it. Justice probably tells me I'm not quite right for it. So maybe I'm not going to get the job. You have to go on these sort of mental journeys with yourself. And again, they should probably take more time than than I'm doing right now in these just really, really quick demos. The other thing I would say is that the instantaneous things that click when you do these kinds of things and when you put the puzzle pieces together and your instant answers, I did get it. I would trust those. And then, because that to me is what intuition does, right? When people say they read intuitively, that means something different to me. But intuition to me is the thing of like, you see a card and you're like, oh, it means this. Suddenly, that is intuition to me because the brain has suddenly recognized a pattern and made sense of it. That doesn't mean it's always right, but what I would do is listen to that and then mine the context, the question in the card, to justify that that's true. So if I, in the path that I took, justice represented that, no, I wasn't going to get it because of the journey that I took. But if I list all these things and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get it because it's the right thing. Trust that and then try to prove it with what you know. And then go with that. And then you can take that to the forums and say, hey, here's how I landed on this. You know what I mean? What do you think? People are still going to disagree. And I do think that your interpretation ultimately is the right one. And the right one is always tricky, right? Because you may find out you didn't get the job. But you did a reading and you said you were gonna. So you're bad at this and you should probably quit, right? No. That's the other risk. And this is one reason why I really don't like yes or no questions like, did I get the job? Because I actually talk about this in my book. I had that question and I did a series of readings about it and the answer kept changing. And I kept thinking, I'm bad at this. And then I found out after I got the offer, so I did get the job, that there was some back and forth about me because they were going to hire me. And then someone unrelated came along and said, I need to be involved in this decision. And there had to be another round of interviews. And looking back, I say, oh, that's why I had that meeting, and then ultimately I did get the job. But as I went through the process, things were changing. And when we do a reading, I really do believe that it's a snapshot of what is going on at that moment. And it can change, especially with yes and no, especially when things like a job are at play. Even like, will she ask me out or will he propose? Maybe he's not thinking about that yet. Maybe she hasn't considered you yet. So yes or no questions have sort of a terminal quality to them. They assume that an answer is some way forever. And that's not really the case. You may do or say something that makes them go, oh, I never thought about her that way. I never thought about him that way. Or, something may happen in someone's life and they're like, maybe I am ready to get married. You know what I mean? So whatever the case is, like, yes and no questions are really tough. And so whenever you do a yes or no reading, if your prediction does not turn out correctly, if at all possible, I would recommend doing some Sherlock Holmesing to see maybe how a decision was made. And that could give you some some insight into fluctuation, because at the moment it could have been a yes and it wound up being no because of X, Y, and Z. That's not always possible, so if it's not possible, consider what might have been at play. But one way or the other, I wouldn't judge your talent as a reader on yes or no questions, because they are, I think, among the most inconsistent. I remember Donnelly talking about doing a Lenormand workshop just before the election, and they had been doing readings and readings, and it was candidate X is going to win, and suddenly it wasn't. Something changed. And looking back now, we know things changed, and we know there were other factors at work. So just, when it comes to yes or no predictions, I would also offer that as like a bonus tip. And I think I've talked about this before, but don't put all your eggs in that basket. Whether it's planning for what you're going to do next, am I going to get the job? Great. I'm going to get a raise. I'm going to go buy a house. I'd wait still until you find out. Or did I get the job as a indicator of your talent? It's not often an indication of talent. I use this story as an illustration a lot too when it comes to yes or no questions. Many, many, many years ago, not really all that long after I had started reading, a friend asked me for a reading on whether or not he would meet someone. And I can't remember what the cards were. I think the King of Swords was in the center. But everything was guarded and shut down. And I said, no, you're too closed off. And within a week or two, he met someone and said, ha, you were wrong. And I said, no, but you opened up. Things changed. You didn't like the reading I gave you, and I told you were shut down and shut off. And someone came along and you opened up to them rather than shutting them down. And so you changed. So the reading wasn't wrong. You evolved. And that's what readings are supposed to help us do. So anyway, that's the problem with yes or no questions. So I would also just sort of not recommend doing them. But if you do, just know that you're not bad if your prediction is false. And I guess that goes for any prediction, whether it's a yes or no question or not, because things change. But the main purpose of this video is that if you do a reading for yourself, I believe that your interpretation of the card is the key one, and that you can get help from other people in validating how you got there. But if you're stuck, what you need really is a system to help you figure out the answer. And so if the question is, did I get a job? Did I get this job? And the card is the Emperor. Everything you know about the job, your situation, everything you know about the card, and then you figure out the puzzle piece. If we to do a quick example, I'm not happy in my job, but I don't hate it. I'm bored. I want something new, career change. The Emperor comes up. What do we know about the Emperor? He's stable. He doesn't move. He's sort of stuck to the ground. No, you're not going to get it. The Empress is nurturing. She's creative. She creates an environment of enthusiasm. Yes, you'll probably get it. So, you know what I mean? Just sit with it. I don't think we sit with readings enough sometimes, and we reach for help in ways that are less helpful than they could be. I don't think another person can read your reading for you. You need to read it yourself. But what we can do as peers and collaborators and supporters of each other is sort of ask questions. And I think that that's another thing. If we're in a forum, I think one thing we can do is ask probing questions. Well, what do you know about the tower? What's your situation at work? Oh, well, how do you think those two things, like open-ended questions, if we really want to be supportive of each other and helping each other, I think that is the single most important thing we can do. And I do this all the time. I want to yeah, I know this. Ooh, I know the answer. And we throw out what we know about the card, but we didn't ask the question. We didn't sit there and shuffle the cards. We didn't draw the spread. We have a different relationship than the reader does. So the best thing I think we can do is ask probing questions. You know, what about this? Have you thought about that? How would you interpret this for someone else? You know what I mean? The more questions we can ask, the better we are going to be as peer supporters, because we're more likely to help that reader figure out their own meaning for the card, which is, to me, the key. So that's my tip. I hope this helps. I'm happy to be making videos again. And thanks to whoever asked that question, if they ever see this video. I hope you got the job and it was a good thing for you. But this was a really good example. And for anyone who watches this, I hope it helps. And again, I just want to say that I've learned this stuff through my own struggles. And I don't always practice what I preach, because I am lazy some days. So I will just draw cards and say, and I'm too lazy to sit with it and find out. But that's the way we get the work done. You know, everything worth doing sometimes involves some struggle, and sometimes involves some sweat. So that's ultimately one of my underlying tips if you're learning anything, is like, do it. Bob Ross, the famous painter of internet days, not internet days, of 70s PBS days. I'm looking for my Bob Ross candle. I don't know where he moved to. He's back. Oh, he's back there. There he is. This is so confusing. There he is. Anyway, he said talent is nothing more than applied interest. And he meant that the more you do something, the better you get at it. So I think, you know, some people are preternaturally good at some things. Some people will always be savants. But we can all get better if we're interested enough to keep working through it, to stick with it, to sweat it out, to keep painting those happy little trees, to keep struggling and not knowing the answer, but to not have someone else tell us the answer, to sit with it and figure it out. Those are the ways we get better. And those are the ways that we also internalize the meanings of the cards. It's more important that we, honestly, I think this is something too, I don't think I've said before, but like, the times where we don't know, the times where we have to struggle and suffer and sweat out the answer, those are the biggest learning experiences, because we're not going to forget that. You know, we're going to remember when the next time the tower comes up. Oh, remember that time? Yeah, that card means this. So as you're learning, especially when you're starting out, those times where you had to sit there and you could feel the sweat in front of you, and your friend was sitting on the other side of the table, and you're like, oh my God, they hate me. And you finally say something, you're not going to forget. And the thing you said is likely as valuable as anything else, because you got there yourself through the work. And that's key. So anyway, I'll shut up now. As always, be good. I hope this is helpful, and take care. Have a good week.